A raven stalks the man who wronged it for years. An octopus manipulates a puzzle lock it has never seen before. A herd of elephants stands in silence at the bones of one of their own, touching them gently with their trunks. These aren't cute animal facts. They are cracks in the wall between us and the minds of other creatures. Cracks modern science is still trying to see through. Researchers today use brain scans, memory tests, and problem-solving experiments to understand animal consciousness. But the truth is, we're late to the conversation. Ancient people didn't need brain scans or lab experiments to tell them animals had minds. They were already sure of it. Thousands of years ago, people didn't need machines to convince them. They were already certain animals could think, feel, and even share in the same spiritual world as humans. Their belief shaped laws, inspired art, and dictated how they hunted, farmed, and prayed. They built temples to honor them, told stories that blurred the line between man and beast, and left behind objects that speak to relationships far deeper than survival. Some of those objects are strange, some are beautiful, and one of them, found in the dark of a Paleolithic cave, might just be the oldest evidence of an animal realizing it exists. If that's true, it would mean ancient eyes saw something we only began to test for in the last half-century. This is armchair archaeology, and today we're decoding animal consciousness in the ancient world, and what those old ways of seeing might still have to teach us now. Before we begin, if you enjoy exploring the ideas and artifacts that bridge the past and the present, take a second to subscribe. That way, you won't miss the next time we uncover a piece of history that changes how we see the world and ourselves.
In the cradle of civilization, the people of Mesopotamia saw animals not only as resources, but as moral actors. Their great stories, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, show this vividly. Enkidu, the wild man who runs with gazelles and protects animals from hunters, begins life fully part of the animal world before stepping into human society. To the Mesopotamians, that shift wasn't pure fiction. It reflected a truth about how human and animal realms could overlap. Yet their view of animals wasn't confined to myth, it was written into law. The Code of Hammurabi, carved in stone nearly 4,000 years ago, doesn't just list property disputes. It records cases where oxen, dogs, and even sheep caused harm and required judgment. Responsibility could extend to an animal itself, as if it could be held to account. In other words, they saw animals not just as property, but as fellow members of society, capable of right and wrong. Archaeologists in the city of translated a small clay tablet detailing an unusual case. A temple goat had wandered into a sacred area, violating a taboo. The animal was brought before the priests, and the ritual punishment mirrored the formal process for a human offender. To the scribes who recorded it, this wasn't strange. Animals were part of the same moral fabric. Modern animal law still grapples with similar questions. Today, some countries recognize certain animals, like great apes or dolphins, as having limited legal personhood, granting them protections once reserved only for humans. In Mesopotamia, the impulse was already there. The idea that an animal's actions carried meaning and consequence. When you stand before those clay tablets, the wedge-shaped marks still crisp after millennia. It's hard not to feel that their view of animal minds was more than superstition. It was an early recognition that we share the world with other thinking, acting beings, a recognition we're only now beginning to reclaim.
In ancient Egypt, animals were not merely admired, they were living embodiments of the divine. The cat was Bastet's grace in fur and muscle. The jackal with its keen nose and silent tread walked in the shadow of Anubis, guardian of the dead. These weren't symbolic associations for art alone, they were truths woven into daily life. The reverence went far beyond temple walls. Archaeologists have uncovered entire necropolises for animals, mummified ibises wrapped in linen, crocodiles with carefully sealed jaws, bulls interred in stone sarcophagi. Many were buried with offerings, as if their souls, like human ones, needed food, amulets, and ritual care for the journey to the next world. In Saqqara, a falcon mummy was found still cradling tiny beaded charms under its wrappings. Scans revealed an old injury to the wing, suggesting it had been tended to in life before being prepared for burial. The precision of the linen folds, the protective amulets, the care given even to an injured bird, all speak to a belief in the animal's spiritual agency. Killing a sacred animal, even by accident, could bring the death penalty. It's a punishment that only makes sense if you believe a sacred life is worth more than its earthly use. Such laws only make sense if life was valued beyond its material use. Modern parallels aren't far away. Today, we sanctify endangered species with legal protections, care for injured wildlife in rehabilitation centers, and build sanctuaries where animals live out their lives safe from harm. The impulse is the same, to see another creature not as an object, but as a life with its own purpose. For the Egyptians, that purpose reached beyond death itself. To them, the falcon's spirit would rise to join Horus in the sky, carrying its own consciousness into eternity, not as a lesser soul, but as one more traveler among the gods. Speaking of artifacts you can hold in your own hands, we've just added something new to the Armchair Archaeology store, the Ancient Secrets mug. It's designed for those moments when you're sipping tea or coffee and mulling over the mysteries of the past. You'll find it in our store if you'd like to bring a little ancient wonder to your desk.
For many indigenous peoples of North America, animals were not others, they were kin. The Lakota speak of mitakuye oyasin, all my relations, a phrase that includes every living thing. In Haida stories, Raven is both trickster and creator, shaping the world and teaching through mischief. Among the Ojibwe, a dream vision could reveal a personal animal helper, one whose presence might guide a person for life. These guides were not imaginary friends. A hunter might speak to the spirit of a deer after the kill, offering thanks and explaining the need for its meat. The belief was not just that animals had souls, but that they understood intention. In the American Southwest, archaeologists uncovered a small pouch buried with a hunter nearly 800 years ago. Inside were stone arrow points and a carved bone pendant shaped like a mountain lion's paw. The edges of the carving were worn smooth, as if it had been held often, perhaps before each hunt. To carry it was to carry the mountain lion's strength, speed, and sharp senses. Modern biology uses the concept of umwelt to describe the unique sensory world of each species, how a lion's eyes read motion in the dark, or how a hawk sees ultraviolet traces invisible to us. The hunter may not have had that word, but the practice was the same. Stepping into another creature's way of perceiving to move through the world more effectively. It's a way of seeing the world that blurs the line between biology and spirituality. And for them, there was no need to separate the two. In these traditions, there was no hard border between human and animal mind. The distance between them could be crossed in a dream, a vision, or by holding a carved token worn smooth in the palm, a bridge to a consciousness that was different, but not separate. It's striking how many of these traditions saw the human and animal worlds as one continuous landscape. If this fascinates you, I've gathered even more examples, from the earliest domestication rituals to mysterious animal-human hybrids in ancient art, in Secrets of the Ancient World, Mysteries, Technologies, and Lost Civilizations. You'll find the link waiting in the pinned comment.
Across the vast frozen landscapes of what is now Siberia, shamans have long been regarded as travelers between worlds. In their traditions, animals were not just companions. They were guides, allies, and even alternate forms of the self. During ceremonies, a shaman might wear eagle feathers, bear claws, or the antlers of a reindeer, not as costumes, but as vessels. By taking on the animal's outward form, they believed they could step into its mind, borrow its senses, and see what it saw. The steady rhythm of the drum marked the journey, each beat carrying the spirit further from the human body and closer to the animal world. In a cave along the Yenisei River, archaeologists found a painted figure with the legs of a deer and the torso of a human, mid-stride, as if running. Around it, etched hunting scenes show predator and prey sharing the same eyes. The placement hints that the figure may have been a focal point for trance rituals, a reminder that boundaries between species could be crossed. Ethnographers recording Siberian shamanic accounts in the 19th century heard stories of journeys where the soul left the body entirely, flying with birds, swimming with seals, or running with wolves. These were not treated as dreams or metaphors. They were direct experiences of other ways of being. Modern neuroscience has begun to explore similar territory, studying how the brain can simulate different bodies and perspectives in virtual environments. What shamans achieved through ritual and vision, scientists now attempt with technology. For the Siberian shaman, learning from an animal didn't mean taming it. It meant becoming it, and returning with the memory of moving through the forest on 4 legs, ears tuned to the faintest crunch of snow miles away. If that vision of crossing into an animal's mind through ritual sparked your imagination, you can help keep stories like this alive by using the Super Thanks button. It's a simple way to support the channel while letting me know these deep dive explorations matter to you.
In the city-states of ancient Greece, philosophers argued not only about the human soul, but about the souls of animals. Around the 4th century BCE, Aristotle proposed a ladder of life, placing humans above animals and animals above plants. Animals, he said, could perceive and remember, but lacked the rational soul that set humans apart. This hierarchy shaped Greek thought for centuries and influenced how later societies viewed non-human creatures. But 2 centuries earlier, Pythagoras had taught something radically different, that the soul was immortal and could be reborn into any living body, human or animal. To harm an animal, then, was to harm a soul that might once have been your friend, or might one day be you. His followers practiced vegetarianism, not as a dietary choice, but as a moral obligation. In what is now southern Italy, where Pythagoras founded his school at Croton, archaeologists uncovered a modest household altar. Scattered among pottery shards were small bronze figurines of hares and birds, their surfaces worn smooth from years of handling. Ash traces suggest they were part of regular offerings. The animals here weren't charms or trophies. They were honored as carriers of the same eternal essence found in humans. It's the same philosophical fault line we still argue over. Are animals beneath us on a ladder, or right beside us on the same path? Today, debates about animal rights echo this ancient divide. Some legal systems still treat animals purely as property. Others, inspired by growing recognition of animal cognition, are granting protections based on sentience. The questions Aristotle and Pythagoras wrestled with remain alive. Are we separated from animals by a hierarchy, or are we bound to them in a cycle of shared existence? For the Pythagoreans, the answer was simple. When you looked into an animal's eyes, you weren't looking down a ladder, you were looking across.
In ancient India, the belief that animals could think and feel wasn't a philosophical fringe. It was central to daily life. Jainism, Buddhism, and strands of Hindu thought shared the principle of Ahimsa, nonviolence toward all living beings. Every creature, from the elephant to the smallest ant, was seen as carrying a soul capable of suffering and joy. This belief shaped practical choices. Jain monks walked with soft brooms, sweeping the ground to avoid stepping on insects. Farmers left portions of their harvest for birds and wild animals. Kings sponsored animal hospitals alongside human ones. In the 3rd century BCE, Emperor Ashoka, after converting to Buddhism, carved his policies into stone pillars across the Mauryan Empire. One, found near the ancient city of Sanchi, ordered wells dug and shade trees planted along royal roads, for the comfort of man and beast alike. It also listed medicinal herbs to be cultivated for both, not as separate lists, but side by side, as if their needs were equally important. It was a vision of society where the comfort of a bull on the road mattered just as much as the comfort of a king. This wasn't sentimentality. It was governance built on the idea of an interconnected world, where harming another being meant harming the whole. The care of animals was self-care on a cosmic scale. Today, echoes of Ahimsa appear in vegetarian and vegan movements, wildlife conservation laws, and even in modern debates over factory farming. Scientists studying animal cognition now confirm what these ancient systems assumed, that animals experience pain, emotion, and social bonds in ways not unlike our own. Standing before Ashoka's weathered inscriptions, the chiseled lines still visible after 2,000 years, it's clear these laws were more than politics. They were a declaration. Every living being moves through the same web of existence, and compassion toward one strengthens all.
In the great cities of the ancient Maya and Aztec worlds, animals were not only earthly creatures, they were forces that shaped the cosmos. The jaguar, master of the night, could move between the realms of the living and the dead. The serpent, shedding its skin, embodied renewal and the endless turning of time. Beneath the temple of the feathered serpent at Teotihuacan, in what is now central Mexico, archaeologists uncovered a cache of jaguar skulls arranged in precise symmetry, alongside obsidian blades and seashells carried from distant coasts. Together, they formed a symbolic map. The seashells for water, the blades for sacrifice, the jaguar for the dark power that sustains the balance of the world. Maya temples often align with astronomical events, solstice sunrises, the path of Venus. At Chichen Itza, sunlight on certain days strikes serpent carvings so that their bodies appeared to slither down the pyramid steps. To those watching, this wasn't an illusion, but a moment when the spirit of the serpent manifested in harmony with the heavens. At Copan, in modern-day Honduras, a jade mask carved as a jaguar face still holds inlaid pyrite eyes that would have glinted in firelight. Faint traces of red pigment suggest it was once worn in ceremonies by rulers or priests, channeling the jaguar's strength. Modern science has found that many animals, from migratory birds to sea turtles, navigate by celestial patterns. The Maya and Aztec priesthood may not have used the language of biology, but they understood animals as beings attuned to the rhythms of the universe, partners in reading the same cosmic clock. The temples, masks, and alignments were not decorations, they were conversations between humans, animals, and the sky itself.
We've now seen jaguars guiding rulers, serpents tied to the cosmos, and ravens carrying wisdom across continents. There are so many more layers to these beliefs, including artifacts and sites we couldn't fit here, in Secrets of the Ancient World. You'll find it linked in the pinned comment if you'd like to keep wandering down these ancient paths.
Across Iron Age Europe and the Viking world, animals were more than symbols in myth. They were observers, informants, and at times prophets. Celtic druids were said to know the language of birds, which often meant interpreting the movements and calls of wildlife to guide decisions. In Norse tradition, Odin's two ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, flew across the world each day, returning with news. Beyond myth, ravens really did shadow hunting parties and armies.
their flight patterns hinting at prey ahead or the site of a recent battle. Warriors learned to read their signals as keenly as any scout's report. To them, a raven's wing beat could be a warning, a guide, or the whisper of the gods themselves. On the Isle of Skye in Scotland, archaeologists unearthed a small bronze plaque from the early medieval period, depicting a man seated with two birds perched on his shoulders. Its surface is worn from years of handling, suggesting it may have been a talisman for someone who valued, or longed for, such a partnership. Norse sagas also tell of wolves howling before storms and seals calling from the shore before a shipwreck. Modern research has shown that many animals can sense shifts in barometric pressure or detect subtle vibrations before seismic events. What was once framed as prophecy may have been instinct honed by a different set of senses. In these northern traditions, animals were not background figures in human affairs. They were active participants, their knowledge gathered through lives lived closer to the raw forces of the world. For people whose survival often hinged on reading the land and the sky, the sharp eyes of a raven or the restless movement of a wolf could matter as much as the strength of a sword arm. Hearing how the Celts, Vikings, and Norse trusted animals as messengers makes me wonder, if you had to choose a guide animal based on its wisdom or senses, which would it be, and why? I'd love to read your thoughts below.
Across the many cultures of Africa, animals often take the lead in the stories that carry wisdom from one generation to the next. In West African tales, Anansi the spider is clever, mischievous, and endlessly resourceful. It's a reminder that quick thinking can outmatch strength. In Southern Africa, the hare fills a similar role, slipping past danger through cunning and speed. These tales were more than entertainment. A story about the patience of the crocodile might warn of hidden danger in still water. A parable about the hyena's adaptability could encourage resilience during lean seasons. Even the call of the guinea fowl before rain found its way into storytelling, serving as both omen and practical weather report. Near the Niger River in the Sahel, archaeologists excavated the remains of an ancient settlement and found a small carved tortoise buried alongside a decorated water jar. Its surface was smooth from years of handling. In local tradition, the tortoise represents wisdom gained through steady observation, a quality as essential for managing water and land as for leadership. It's not hard to picture the scene. A griot, the community's storyteller and historian, seated by the fire, slowly turning the figurine in his hand as he speaks. Children lean forward. At the moment the tortoise outwits his rivals, elders nod, knowing the deeper lesson will linger long after the laughter fades. These stories didn't just survive, they adapted, carrying lessons about the land and its animals across centuries. Today, conservationists sometimes work with local storytellers to pass on ecological knowledge, blending tradition with modern science. The method is timeless. A memorable story can preserve information about the land, the seasons, and the animals that live alongside us. In these traditions, animals weren't metaphors for human qualities. They were teachers in their own right, carrying knowledge worth listening to.
In ancient China, animals were part of the same cosmic order as humans, threads in a single living tapestry. Daoist philosophy taught that all beings followed the Tao, the way, moving in balance with the rhythms of nature. To live in harmony meant to honor the role of animals, not as subordinates, but as fellow travelers along the same path. When Buddhism arrived from India in the first millennium CE, it brought the idea of reincarnation across all forms of life. A soul could pass from a human to an animal and back again, shaped by karma. In this view, to harm an animal was to harm a being that might once have been your kin, or might be again. These ideas found expression in art and ritual. Han Dynasty tombs often contain silk paintings of immortals riding cranes, deer wandering among pine trees, and fish leaping toward the moon. These were visions of a paradise where humans and animals shared in spiritual perfection. In Sichuan, archaeologists uncovered a lacquered box painted with a pair of white cranes, their necks curved in mirrored arcs. The cranes, symbols of longevity, were also guides between the earthly and celestial realms. The box had been placed beside the deceased, as if to ensure their journey would be accompanied. Today, the Daoist sense of harmony with animals echoes in environmental ethics and wildlife protection movements in China and beyond. The idea that human well-being depends on the health of the natural world is now supported by ecology and climate science. Yet, it is the same truth these philosophies expressed centuries ago. To the Daoist mind, the heron in the marsh, the ox in the field, and the fox in the bamboo are not separate lives. They are companions, each moving along the same way.
We began by asking how ancient cultures understood the minds of animals. Along the way, we've seen them as messengers, moral actors, teachers, and even cosmic companions. Laws, stories, rituals, and art all point to a relationship far deeper than simple survival. And in a cave in what is now southern France, there's an image that brings the journey full circle. Painted over 30,000 years ago, it shows a bison beside a pool of water. The head is lowered, but not in the posture of drinking. The artist angled the horns, the eyes, and the gentle ripple in the water so that the bison seems to be looking not at prey or danger, but at its own reflection. Some researchers think this is the earliest record of an animal recognizing itself, an observation made tens of thousands of years before modern mirror tests tried to measure the same thing. Whether or not that's exactly what the artist intended, it's clear our ancestors saw something in that animal's gaze, something we're only now beginning to study. The wall between us and them may not be a wall at all, more like a thin veil, one our ancestors may have learned to see through long before we tried to measure it. And perhaps that's the part worth carrying forward. Not just asking if animals think, but asking how we can learn to see as they do. This is Armchair Archaeology, where the past is never as distant as it seems. Which ancient worldview feels closest to your own? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to keep exploring the past's deepest mysteries, subscribe and ring the bell so you're here for the next discovery. Until then, keep your curiosity sharp and your mind open to the traces left behind.